It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, September 28th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. I was thinking about this before I went live today, and something I've been trying to kind of juggle in regard to the timing of the shows. And somebody in the chat's already pointed out, I'm not even finished with the show you did yesterday, because it's content heavy, obviously. With what we're dealing with today, I don't know how you can not be doing that and really try to get to the meat of what's going on and understand all these topics. What I'm trying to think about is how I do this. To explain is basically I'll do a show that can be 4 hours long. And then I recognize a lot of people don't even see that until the next morning, middle of the day. Maybe they watch it later in the day when they get done with work. And so I recognize there's a hard overlap right there. And so what I'll tend to do is leave the next day open and usually prep the entire day for another 4-hour show the next day. And it becomes a cycle like that. And it's not, I mean, it's that ends up being pretty somewhat consistent, but I don't like the gap in the day in the content because a lot gets missed, even though that happens just because of life all the time anyway. So what I'm trying to consider here is that in this, again, it's not, even if I plan to do this, it will alter because of circumstances. The goal will be to do a show like I did yesterday and then have like a follow-up show. Like today, for example, where I have a few things I want to follow up on, some points that are additional to what I said yesterday that I see happening today, and then the current events that I think are relevant to get into. Today, of course, there's some pretty widely discussed events, shootings as usual, that, you know, meaning that shootings as usual become largely focused events, whether or not they're, really the point is that people in partisan sides, that's kind of the point of the show today, will grab onto a story and try to use it to their team's agenda, really in every possible circumstance. And today it's a tragedy, right? People were killed in a church setting. We have another example of a guy who shot at people in North Carolina from a boat, both of which we're going to get into around the conversation of what appears to be political leanings, what the evidence shows, and how the entire partisan field plays it the same way, regardless, every single time. And just how, well, I'm going to leave it till we get into it, but many different points of this that really expose the way this always goes and what the real vulnerability is right now. And then, of course, like I said, the agenda. People that are jumping into it immediately and calling it an attack on Christians, except we're talking about a Mormon church. And no, that is not the same thing. And we'll get into that. But other things we're going to get into to start. But what my point was, I'm going to try to do those kind of the timings in the shows like that, where the next day can maybe be, which probably end up being 2+ hours anyway. But my goal will be to do shorter versus the longer ones. So keep that in mind for those that keep up on the show day to day. I'm not going to notate them any differently, but just something to note for those of you that are passionate TLAV followers out there. That's going to be kind of what I aim at in general. But either way, sorry for Stephen, whoever else in the chat is not caught up yet. I know there's a lot of content to get to. Hopefully you will take the time to watch it if you truly want to understand the way I see it and why I think these things are important. But as always, the core point is the source material is there for you. I'd like to believe that those that care enough, whether they have time for a 4-hour show or not, can look at the source material, can decide what they want to learn more about, educate themselves, and not just repeat headlines like most of the mainstream alternative media, but truly understand the nuance within the content and come to your own conclusions about it, whether or not that aligns with what I think. So let's start today with a couple of opening points that are really not going to focus on, but something I just didn't want you to miss before we get into a few opening segments that we'll discuss that are largely around, let's see, we basically have, other than the two shootings we're going to discuss and the larger political agenda around it, some AI points I want to make about Donald Trump's statements, kind of extension, again, like I said, followed yesterday, some points he said at the UN that we didn't discuss that I do find very relevant. Interestingly relates to today's conversation because of the way the partisan game is playing out. And like a deep fake conversation, interesting, pretty small points, shouldn't take long to discuss. And it all relates to the larger point today. But just to start off some other points quickly, something like this I wanted you to see. Thank you for GoStar for putting this GoStar in the chat. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And this was just an update As it says here, the greatest humanitarian mission of our time, Samud Flotilla, probably how they pronounce that. The point was, it's the one we've been discussing. And it's prominent. And now they have international backing with people ready to defend it, individual people on boats. I mean, honestly, my gut, Israel's going to do what they're going to do anyway. And that may sound outrageously crazy if you hadn't paid attention in the past. It's what they do. They've attacked these things many times. They've attacked Americans on these many times, including U.S. veterans, including Joe Meters, who was a veteran of the USS Liberty, and held him locked him up in a prison for months, and the U.S. didn't even say anything about it. On that note, the next statement I'll make will be about something like that. But understand that this is going forward, and their argument is the legal reality of being able to deliver food to people who are starving. And even Israel, in many cases, argue that's not something they're stopping, and then will attack, bomb, and do whatever they can to stop these people from doing that. The point that's different about this one is that there's a lot of people involved, including even arguably how this plays out when Israel comes around will be the question. International, like other nations that are saying they're going to stand by them and protect them in this mission, which I've never seen before, not like this. So if Israel decides to attack them, this will be, international incident would not even do that justice. But I promise you, if it happens, even the US and the UK will be pulling punches. I think we've seen that by now. But let's keep an eye on this because it's becoming something, it's beginning to boil over. And hopefully they are able to deliver food to people who need it. Now, on that other point about Joe Meters, I'm going to keep pointing this out. I feel like I should be referencing this every single day. Seeing as how we get suppressed so much, maybe it'll reach a few people who need to see it and not just those of you who are already aware of what's going on. Dr. Simon Godek, 16-year-old American boy who has been held for 7 months now in Israel without due process. I just talked about it yesterday. I'm going to keep pointing this out. 7 months now. This is a child who's an American, third-generation American in Florida, who was born in the United States, who went to visit family who is in the West Bank, not Gaza, and gets arrested, blindfolded, and thrown into prison, been there for 7 months with no process, no allegation, no charge, has lost tons of weight, has diseased because of the way that they handle things in these torture prisons. And you have not heard a single word about that American citizen from Marco Rubio, from Ted Cruz, from Representative Fine, from Donald Trump, from Bondi, from any of the rest of these people out there acting like they care about Americans first. It really upsets me that this is even on. You know why, truly? Because it's undeniable what that shows you. They're willing to put that agenda first over your interests. Now make sense of that, or rather, put that overlay over what we're talking about today. Reconcile that with where we are. They're willing to put interests, at the very least, their own political agendas, before your interests, especially when it comes to a very certain government. Now, when that very certain government's immersed within our policy and these things are happening in real time within your states, ask yourself whether your government's going to side with you or the same agenda. Regardless of your thoughts on this, how in the world we can have an American citizen in a foreign prison for no charge and no one says a word? It really is wild. I'm going to keep bringing this up. Now, last point is a third update, by the way, from yesterday. This is just ridiculous where we are. So this guy is an ICE agent who, as I showed you the day before yesterday and as well as the day today. Of course, this guy clips you the video where you don't really get to see what actually happens. My God, these people are disgusting. I didn't even notice that until just now. Let me see if I still have this. I probably lost the older one. That's just so incredible to me. Let me see if somebody actually played the full thing. The bottom line is, let me do this real quick. This man, without justification, grabs a woman because she basically rested her hand on his arm while pleading with him to let her husband go. Now, I don't care what you that's not about the legal. It's about being a human being and understanding that person was not in any way trying to initiate violence. And even if they were, the way that he responded was to literally lift her off the ground in front of her children and bull rush her to the ground and throw her down. And then he got relieved from duty, by the way. That's what just happened yesterday. The point of the story today is, oh, yes, they reinstated him with full active duty. And everyone's like, great news, good job, because who cares about immigrants? Or whatever your mindset is. And even if you don't care about immigrants, the idea is that you don't care about, the law, obviously, because look, whether or not you think that touching a person, which is someone trying to tell me, is obviously a violation, and Bondi said, if you touch anybody, we're going to come after you. Why do you think she said that? Fine. If you think they're breaking the law, charge them with touching somebody's arm. Carry that out through court and see how that works out. I don't, the childish nature of claiming that we're taking a stand. And even if you think that person was unjust in what she was claiming for, it's a way that he reacted. And the fact that somebody who has rights, like she does, like anybody does in this country, a person violated those rights with what he did. And the fact that you don't care about that because of your agenda shows you, just like Trump was doing, or just like rather the government's doing, that you care more about the agenda than you do about the facts on the ground, the case, the law, the constitutional rights. So in that same circumstance, you would be the guy to leave that American citizen in Israel because your agenda is more important. And it's a small point, but it is the same ongoing thing everywhere we look. And so I just think it's disgustingly weird that, so he does it, he gets removed because somebody in that reality was like, yeah, that's insane, and that person needs to be removed. Whether or not we agree with it, it's obviously wrong. And then you get the White House that steps in and goes, never mind, because our agenda is more important. Who cares about the reality of the law? Who cares about anything other than what we want to present, which is we're right and you're wrong no matter what? But Eric Daugherty says, great news. Now, once we get to the point where people just like him, including him, are lying to you about what's going on today to push a very a division agenda, an agenda like, Alec Jones selling his holy war t-shirts. This is where it's all being driven, using things like what happened and accusing people like us of being accurate about the story, of being insensitive, despite the fact that my personal feelings about whether it's a tragedy is irrelevant to covering the news. But maybe we should take a moment to really address something first. Something that the Republicans, I think, need to really identify is something called virtue signaling. Remember that story? Remember that conversation about how ridiculous it was? The left was always out there virtue signaling and demonstrating how I care and how they don't. Isn't that exactly what the right's doing right now with all of their virtue signaling about their righteous beliefs and how you're all disgusting, evil people? It's whether or not that is the case and that they are actually good, righteous people. It's about trying to project that idea over the top of every story because you want to demonstrate that you are on the right side of things. It's the same thing for people who are not childishly lost in a partisan divide. And just think about that today. My point was, people like this are so willing to rush into a story to make a case about why they think this is happening for their agenda, and it turns out it wasn't even the way they framed it. Due diligence is not something that usually plays a factor in the mainstream alternative media. We'll come back to that. But opening points aside, I wanted you to make sure you saw that this person was reinstated despite the obvious reality. Officer relieved of current duties after violent confrontation, caught on camera. This was what we covered yesterday. Just like that. Brought back. Now, other opening points. The patriotic blonde, somebody who actually worked with Donald Trump's campaign, who is now openly telling you that if you're honest about this, you recognize he is, whatever you want to call it, double-crossing you, violating his promises, Epstein, everything else. Now, whether you agree with that, that's her opinion. I agree with that. I think a lot of Republicans are starting to be honest about that. She simply writes, Thomas Massie has not only demanded the Epstein files be released, but he's also pushed to repeal the War Powers Act. Day by day, I like Thomas Massie's stance more and more. Except, hold that for a second, audit Fort Knox, she continues, limit income tax and the Fed, abolish the IRS, secure constitutional liberties, and mandate term limits. And you wonder why the establishment hates him. He stands for everything, literally everything the deep state is against. Which is interesting, seeing as how the people who are currently pushing against that stuff are the ones claiming to fight the deep state. Now, a lot of that could very well just be more political bluster. As much as I want to believe in anybody who claims they're doing the right thing for the right reason, we need to be skeptical, especially for politicians. And I would argue if Thomas Massie is the person that he claims he is, that he would expect that from us, that he would demand that we hold him accountable, right? Isn't that what an honest person would do? So, I'm being very genuine because I really do want to believe that somebody like this is in a position able to do things for the right reasons. I've told you how skeptical, how very pessimistic I am because of our entire lives showing us that we have a reason to be. Nonetheless, I'm saying all of this for a reason because I do agree that this is what he's projecting as to what he wants to do, and some of them he's already doing. The problem for me is stuff like this. Thomas Massie posted this. Despite the occasional friction, Rand Paul and Massie both praised Trump as the best president of their lifetimes, but not correct on everything. See, now look, I don't even think he believes that. I don't think Massie actually believes that. If you can call out the things he's doing, inherently, if you're calling him out for a cover-up of a massive sexual trafficking ring, which is what he's claiming, kind of hard to say, but also the best president of my lifetime, right? I think he's doing that because politics, because that is what they all do. And my sad revelation here is that he's still playing politics, but maybe for the right reasons, maybe for the best outcome. Maybe he has to work through the system to do the right thing at the end. That's what a lot of them tell themselves. My point is we have to question them. We have to constantly be skeptical. And like I said, if he is a person truly fighting for the right things, that he would demand that you do that, right? I hope. I'm still going to pay attention. By the way, I'm hoping that I might have an interview coming with him through just back channel, somebody who knew him. And they said that they might be reaching out to me. I hope so. And I'll be very real, very hopeful, but also very critical, like I would hope he would expect. Lastly, Donald Trump, confused by public's obsession with Jeffrey Epstein, insists, it was a different time in the 90s. Back when rape was cool and we all pretended whatever he's trying to suggest there. Very, very strange statement. I'm just going to pretty much brush by this. The point is that he's simply still going, why does everybody care about Epstein? Are we still talking about Epstein? Is anybody dumb enough to pretend like he doesn't know what his entire cabinet has been telling you, that what he has insinuated, his posts have insinuated personally on his counts? So now he's just trying to downplay it to make you decide that somehow it's no longer in your interest because Trump said. But anybody with a brain can go, yeah, that's pretty crazy. That's wild. In fact, since we currently have all the victims going, why are the files being released? They're using our names to keep files from being released, and we don't care. And he's saying, why does everybody care about this? Whether or not you agree with the picture behind it or whether Trump's involved in any of it, that's a cover-up, guys. That is a blatant, on the record, in front of you cover-up that anybody honest is covering. I just think that's crazy. And we'll come back to that more. We will keep up on what's happening there, even though most of the mainstream alternative media acts like it doesn't exist anymore. Another quick point about January 6th. How many times we can see this with people like Kash Patel or anybody else in the partisan game left and right over the years, where they step in with all their fury and just passion, like projecting anyway, that we're going to change the world, or we're not going to let them get away with anything. No one's above the law. And every time, right? And then go on to let, Israeli pedophiles go back home, block the Epstein list, and, all the things that we're talking about. Well, he comes out and says, citing this article from Fox, FBI's Patel clarifies role of hundreds of agents on January 6th. Says Ray lied. Now, the reason that's there is to counterbalance what he's actually saying. See, Ray lied. Bad guy on the other side. That's what that's supposed to be. Or rather, whatever, somebody who's technically whatever side you pretend he's on against Trump. So he comes out and says 274 FBI agents were thrown into crowd control on January 6th against FBI standards. Oh, wait. Okay, so they weren't there to manipulate and lead them from the front and psyop kind of thing. So is Patel now telling you that they are lying about that? That all of your Republican information about the reality of the people who were 100% manipulating that stuff on the ground that we've proven 75 times over? Or is he basically siding with the establishment narrative that, no, they were there to control and it had nothing to do with the psychological operation? He says that failure was on corrupt leadership. Violating standards is what he's talking about. Thanks to agents stepping up, the truth is coming out about a violation of standards to use them for crowd control is what he's actually talking about. Transparency, justice, accountability. Well, as Diligent Denzian points out rightly, after a riot was declared, he says, we see you. He's not saying the feds were in on it. He's actually, if you're being honest with yourself, reinforcing the establishment narrative that they weren't. Are we waking up yet, MAGA? That's what he wrote. Agents weren't sent into crowd control mission, or were, after a riot was declared. So what they're claiming is you guys got crazy and then they sent them in to make sure everything went okay. Nothing about FBI actually Ray out there going, let's go into the Capitol, Fed, all the reality of the conversation, or Antifa caught on video claiming they tricked everybody to go in, or people from the Azov movement on the ground screaming in Russian. You guys have covered this 1,000 times. These aren't my opinions. They're on video. So I think what's insane about this is people that are protecting Patel or on the side of the partisan game will attack me for simply challenging him right now, despite the fact that this is what everybody honest is pointing out on the right. Here, I'll include this yet again. And there's many shows I can include. This is just the one that has the title that's very specific, but also with the images you can see. January 6th was always a very clear government operation. This is not a partisan take, guys. They say what's funny is I do this show then, and I'm, you MAGA Nazi Republican. Now those very same Republicans are calling me a snowflake because I'm challenging their immigration point. No, but see, this is just what it looks like to have your own opinions, not bound by some partisan blind mindset. And the reality is it very clearly was. And at the same time, I can clearly point out that what the Republicans are doing are trying to put you in a technocratic prison. But the reality, guys, is that he is towing the line. He's coming out and telling you exactly the opposite of what that finding should show you. 274 FBI agents. Let's realize, if you look back at the information on the first so many months of the story, which we were covering and everybody else was at the time, we already proved to you that there were people that were there. We even show you the FBI informants that were part of the Oath Keepers side, or the what was it? The Naval Psychological Operations. The woman that worked for it. Now she says she was just there of her own accord. Sure, maybe. But the point was that continued and more it came out that they were there and that they were doing far more than just helping stop the evil Republicans from breaking down the Capitol, which is what he's talking about. It just blows my mind, the kind of stuff that the team sport politic people will do, and that how many honest conservatives will be quiet about it. Call it out. More to talk about on that, I'm sure. Before we get to more of the conversation of the focal point today, I want to start with a couple points about AI, the UN overlap, and just a few points that are relevant to all this. Because really, as we get into what these, even just any of these shooting developments, we always have to be able to realize that some things about can a government fake that? Let's be clear. I don't think these things so far look like anything other than events, maybe driven into reality, which is always something we should ask. But historically, can they fake things? Absolutely. And you should always be okay to ask that, but evidence should be what you care about. Is it something they could be coordinating in some way? Always ask that question, because yes, they have. My point in saying all of that is that in these events, you have things that could come from the government, like videos that you should question for reasons like this. But also, more accurately or more to the point, every single time, no matter what the story is, and if you've done this long enough, you see it too, every single time you get left and right and these partisan people, or you could just call it maybe the edgelord scenario, people that don't care about either side, just love to watch everybody. I mean, I get that to a degree. If you see how silly the sides are, it's fun to throw grenades in there and watch them all go crazy. I'm not saying I do that because I care too much about people understanding the truth, but I can understand why somebody might like to watch people who are being subjective attack each other for no reason. My point is that you get people that step in and dump fake information into the conversation, make fake videos, use old videos, use AI to alter things and lie to you. And in a way, it's part of the agenda, because it ultimately creates an era of, well, we have to doubt everything, but let them tell us what to look at. You see, question everything is always the right thing to do, but come to your conclusions about it. And it's okay to be like, well, I don't know. Everything I have in front of me does not answer it, so it's okay that I don't know right now. Don't look to the government to tell you what you're supposed to think, which is where this all kind of leads right now. Trump claims video of items, and this is a very small story, but it's worth making a point about. He claims that items thrown from the White House window, probably AI, after aid fingers contractor. It's a very weird story. Now, really just wanted to show you that you can see the videos and the images. Oh, there were some things I was going to read to you, but basically all you see is a video of something. Oh, it's not the one. Basically falling out of a window. And what the article reads, it says, yeah, those windows are sealed, Trump says. Those windows they're sealed. They can't open them, which appears to not be the case. And it says the person behind the mysterious dumping was a contractor who was doing regular maintenance while the president was gone. Apparently, they found out later. The White House official told the Post without specifying when the curious incident took place. Now, honestly, I'm not even getting into whether or not it's important. The trash bag, who knows? Maybe there's something to it. My point is about the kind of weird deception around this. It says it wasn't immediately clear what the objects were or why they were being thrown out the window, which clearly absolutely happened. So were they sealed, and are they? Well, let's listen to what Trump had to say.
There's a video that is circulating online now of the White House where a window is open to the residence upstairs and somebody has thrown a big bag out the window. Have you seen this?
No, that's probably AI generated.
You got to love that. So I mean, it's not like I'm somehow psychic. Everyone sees where this is going, but I'm just keep warning you that the other shoe is going to drop on this. And it already kind of has happened more than once, and probably has happened in ways that we don't even recognize yet. But that where like Trump even kind of jokes about, because it's a true thing to point out that right now, if it's something you don't like, people can go, oh, it's AI, it's fake. Or if it's something that is fake, people will accuse you of it, even if you can prove it's not. Like, that's where we are, and that's used by people like them.
So
Actually, you can't open the windows. You know why? They're all heavily armored and bulletproof.
I love it. Vance in the background going, yep, whatever Trump said. Yep, exactly. Whatever he said is correct, even though it's not.
a fake video.
Well, it's got to be because I know every window up there. The last place I'd be doing it is that because there's cameras all over the place, right, including yours. No, but every window, I've never seen a window that's. In fact, my wife was complaining about it the other day. She said, "Love to have a little fresh air come in, but you can't. They're bulletproof." And number one, they're sealed, and number two, each window weighs about 600 pounds. You have to be pretty strong to open them up. No, that has to be. Where was the window? Let me see.
For the renovations?
Which is the window?
It looks like this is on the 15th Street side, I think. So right here.
Yeah, those windows are sealed. Those windows are they're all sealed. You can't open them.
What you were saying regarding the federal.
It's the kind of thing they do. And
So that's kind of the first part. Just to make the case about the which, like, by all evidence, appears to not be true. And even the story about his wife wanting to open the windows kind of feels like it came from something that happened in the Obama administration. But easy to say that they both could have the same story. But we know how often these presidents just repeat and like repackage old sentiments that are meant to make them feel personable. But that's the first part of it. And I'll show you in a second. Just, it doesn't appear to be the case. So my first point about that is just to point out the silliness of, is he just lying because he thinks he's right? Is he making this up because he doesn't want to have to talk about what it was? It's if you're willing to lie and bluster about such a tiny thing, what wouldn't you lie about?
one of the problems we have with AI, it's both good and bad. If something happens really bad, just blame AI. But
to be very fair, which he does not deserve, he's just simply saying that's what people are doing. And I agree with that. But you realize that's also what they're doing. We've already caught them doing that. Trump, or even the reverse about the MS-13 thing and just doubling down on the fact that that it was real. It's like, it's obviously happened more than once already, but he's not wrong in the general sentiment, but realize that they know that and are doing it as well.
also they create things, it works both ways. If something happens that's really bad, maybe I'll have to just blame AI.
See, now that one was him saying he has to do that, kind of like a joke, but not really though. It wasn't. They will, and they have.
But there's truth to it because I see so many phony things. I saw something as I was growing up from the time I was a baby till now. I said, who did that? It was AI generated. So it's a little bit scary.
Do you think that's even a real thing? So wait, since you were a baby, when they had AI that could generate fake things when you were a baby, Trump? Let's listen to that again.
Something happens really bad, just blame AI. But also they create things, it works both ways. If something happens that's really bad, maybe I'll have to just blame AI. But there's truth to it because I see so many phony things. I saw something as I was growing up from the time I was a baby till now. I said, who did that?
Oh, so an AI fake from when you were a baby, because that lines up, right? Because we had AI and internet the way we do today back in the 70s. Wait, what was it, 80s, 70s? Are you kidding me? Just think about how, that's just it's just the most absurdly stupid thing. He is just, let's be clear. Let's be fair. You could point out things that Bush did, that Obama did, that Biden especially did. They're just like that. Biden more than anybody, really. A bunch of fake things from the background I just can't, we have to laugh at that. Donald Trump just claimed, which I don't even know if he was caught yet. I'm sure there'll be some kind of, lefty article making a joke about it because you should. He just claimed that something he watched when he was a child was an AI fake. Or unless there's some kind of weird language mix-up that he just did right there and he's conflating two things, but that's what the words he just said are exactly that. Right, so I'm so closer to 50s, right? Oh, that's right. He is much older than he appears to be. What did I say, 70? Yeah, that's more than that. He'd be more like 50, 60. So what, he's like 80, right? So it's even older than that. Either way, I just think that's worth really reflecting on how ridiculous that is. And so if you're willing to just kind of lie like you're breathing for no real benefit, what else would you lie about? But so too do all the presidents I could ever name right now.
It was AI generated. So
oh, wait, let me finish that. Just so you're clear that is what he's saying.
If something happens really bad, just blame AI. But also they create things, it works both ways. If something happens that's really bad, maybe I'll have to just blame AI. But there's truth to it because I see so many phony things. I saw something as I was growing up from the time I was a baby till now. I said, who did that? It was AI generated. So
look at the guy right behind him who just realized that that's stupid. I mean, that's the way I look. Look, the guy right behind him, he's listening intently. Now watch his head
The
move.
baby till now. I said, who did that? It was AI.
I really do think that. You look at his eyes, kind of go further for a second, then he goes, what? Like, guys, that's funny. Like, I'm sorry to dwell on it, but that's really stupid that it's AI. AI altered from when he was a baby.
Generated. So it's a little bit scary, to be honest with you. But those windows are all very heavily sealed.
Oh, also not true, apparently. Right. Let's circle back to the beginning. Now, here's a video, or the video, I'll include it as always for new people to the show. Every single thing I mention and point to will be in the show notes below. Anything I add will also be added in real time during the show. But I mean, you could read this article that very clearly highlights the fact that they did prove later that yes, the window was opened and yes, it did get thrown out. So here, just in case, let's ask Rock. Can one open the windows at the White House? And it says the windows at the White House can be opened, but it's not as simple as it sounds. Most windows in the White House are designed to be functional. So not 600 pounds is what they're saying, meaning that they can technically be opened, but security concerns restrict it. That's all it really comes down to, is that they're worried about them being open for security risks, because I do believe that they are bulletproof. But it says the building is a highly secure residence, so windows are often fitted with bulletproof glass, and other protective measures. Opening them would likely require Secret Service approval and would only happen under tightly controlled circumstances, if at all, but can and has. Historical anecdotes, like from the former staff or residents, suggest that windows in private quarters such as these living areas have been occasionally opened. But it's rare and not casual, and it says, for example, First Lady Michelle Obama mentioned in her memoir wanting to open the windows for fresh air, but being limited by security measures. Isn't it funny? So are they reading their old memoirs and trying to present them? I mean, who knows? Or it's just something that other people have dealt with too. But I just think it's humorous to point out. The takeaway, you can't open them. And he lied about that. Or he doesn't know. I just think that's worth recognizing as we go into much, much, much more important things that they're probably also lying about. Now, just on a side note, somebody posted this, maybe something or nothing, but last night the White House shut off their lights. And obviously, I'm not even sure if that actually happened. It does appear based on this video, but they say the lights were shut off and one window was left on. And he goes, oh, but Drop 14 said that. I just want you guys to recognize that QAnon is still very much a real undercurrent within the Trump side. Very much so. And if you think it's not around, guys, this is the kind of stuff they're still doing. Anonymous random drop, pretending still that this is just the same thing going on and not, Michael Flynn or whatever else we're talking about. Like how easy it is to manipulate something like this. An unverifiable anonymous entity that drops cryptic things that you determine what they mean. Military intelligence. What is state secrets and how upheld is the Security Council? What must be completed? So questions. Why? By who? HRC next in line. And then they go, why is Antifa allowed to operate? And that's supposed to be insightful things that break down like this. They're trying to claim that that's still some kind of an inside white hat who is giving you the information ahead of time, even though they've been wrong, 90% of the time, which is easy to prove. I just want you to recognize that, because I believe that not only is there a lot of people in the cabinet that do know that and push that and tap into it, like Cash and Bongino, but also that they manipulate it. They abuse it, right? They use these things and they nod to them when they can to get benefit from it. Now, another part of AI in overlap, I don't even know how to explain. I mean, this is a very weird one to me. And I have verified that this did happen, both from just Grok saying that or from having other articles and reports of it or having the actual post. So Donald Trump posted a video about a fake story, about something that has been fake. This is the Daily Beast conservative platform. New QAnon conspiracy involves a magical bed for zombie JFK. Medbeds or whatever. It's a story that they've circulated in the past. And there's even weird ones I've seen. Remember that story about them like being able to sever your heads and remove them and like reattach them? And it looked very convincing and real, but it was a fake video. He says, tonight, Trump appears to have pushed the false Medbed conspiracy theory, which has spread in the far-right internet over the years. And what I find fascinating is it appears that Alex here wasn't even aware that this is an AI video entirely. This is not even really Donald Trump's voice. I'm going to play it for you. And what the crazy thing is, though, this is Donald Trump, who, yes, did post this video. So first about a false story. Secondarily, a video of himself that's not even him. And now look, but let's be clear. That's actually happened more than once. The video they did about the Gaza thing, which was like an AI thing with him in it. But how do you make sense of this? Did he not know that it was him? Or was he like, did he think that it was him somehow? Or is he trying to convince you? I don't know. Watch it first and you tell me what you think. Oh, there it is. Yeah, sorry.
Trump has announced a historic new healthcare system the launch of America's first Medbed hospitals,
Now, to be clear, this is not a real Fox News segment. It's a fake.
and a national Medbed card for every citizen.
Every American will soon receive their own Medbed card.
So clearly you can hear that's not his voice, right? Donald Trump shared this.
With it, you'll have guaranteed access to our new hospitals led by the top doctors in the nation, equipped with the most advanced technology in the world. These facilities are safe, modern, and designed to restore every citizen to full health and strength. This is the beginning of a new era in American healthcare.
Okay, you get it, right? Why would he post that? After he just made a big point about AI and he'll blame AI and like something about this makes this feel deliberate to me. Like there's something like either this is to distract from something else or it's meant to make a point that we go to later. I really don't know. I'm kind of baffled by why this would even be used. So here's the article again. This is Aaron Rapport simply saying Trump, he has deleted it. Trump deletes his bizarre post featuring an AI video of himself endorsing Medbeds, which raises the question of whether he's so confused that he thought it was a real video of him talking. You can go that direction. You could argue that he's senile and whatever. You know, that's what both sides like to do to each other. And sometimes it is somewhat accurate. To me, I mean, it could be one of two things that I think is most likely. Either he did this for a deliberate reason, like he's done with many other weird videos before to, maybe it's a Q thing, right? To send the narrative through the Q movement, or he shared it because he didn't even look. Like he just saw the quick opening and shared it because that's what he does too. That's the kind of weird social media presidency that we have today. Now I'm going to play this clip in a second before we get to that, because this is where I think it overlaps. This is just Grok saying, yes, on September 27th, Donald Trump posted an AI-generated video on Truth Social promoting Medbeds, a fictional medical technology that's within the QAnon conversation. That's where this comes from. It's just very, very weird to me. There's like weird, like underlayer things going on. So here is Donald Trump recently at the United Nations discussing a plan to use artificial intelligence for very, very particular things that I think is worth hearing right now. And I just think it's weird. Like, so why he just makes this big push for AI when they're very much in the, like they want to be in the driver's seat for the way that the world goes in AI. And yet you got stuff like this being pointed. I don't know. Is there a connection? You decide. Here's what this said, though, and I think this is important to hear.
Is unbelievably dangerous. To prevent potential disasters, I'm announcing today that my administration will lead an international effort to enforce biological weapons convention.
Oh, yeah, the thing that they don't care about, that they violated many, 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 many times and still continue to. I made that point back under, Obama, and I made it under Trump. And remember around the time of the Bolivia point, and I made that point then. They make the statements about the biological. There's what? I mean, even according to the Pentagon, there's 20 plus biological locations around the world. I mean, they are absolutely, and that's not even necessarily just BSL-4 like fake vaccine gain of function scenarios. They're making weapons, guys. They're making dual use technology. So what he's saying is we're going to use AI to enforce that around the world, something that they already violate. But of course, since they're going to be the ones they want to lead this charge, it's pretty easy to argue that they could do something that would make them, sort of like we're going to fight for ESG, and then make the argument that except we're going to keep using oil and gas and nuclear technology because, we use it to fight for freedom, therefore allowing more of that to happen, which is just ridiculous, right? And it's not even like a suggestion of ESG. It's just pointing out their hypocrisy. Same thing here.
Which is going to be meeting with the top leaders of the world by pioneering an AI verification system that everyone can trust.
Okay. You could argue that only means biological. It does not. Like maybe that's the one point he meant right there. But if you can prove to yourself, which you can, that they are actively doing that now around in this country and in larger conversations, an AI verification system, of course, a biometric entry exit tracking system. It's the same conversation, guys. But all the fake partists, all the fake patriots out there are going to pretend like that's not what he's doing. Or this whole speech was about, Trump is poking the eye of the establishment, as he literally proposes a joint conversation about how they'll use this in the world.
Hopefully the UN can play a constructive role and will also go.
Yeah, but everyone else, Jones, they're going after the UN. The globals are going down. They're running scared as he proposes a deal for them to work together. Because that's smart.
Be one of the early projects under AI. Let's see how good it is, because a lot of people are saying it could be one of the great things ever but it also can be dangerous, but it could be put to tremendous use and tremendous good, and this would
It's the best thing ever.
be an example of that.
For the podcast, it's just Trump's pledge for AI-driven biological weapons verification.
To hear me speak about it, but that's the way it is. I like to speak my mind and speak the truth. As we seek to reduce the threat of dangerous weapons today, I'm also calling on every nation to join us in ending the development of biological weapons once and for all. And biological is terrible and
Yeah, right. Real bad, evil stuff, and we hate it while we make them all around the world. And while Israel is the leading charge in that, where they literally test these things on Palestinians every single day. Provable stuff, guys. We've talked about this 100 times over. So Trump is using the argument of going after the bad. Of course, when the bad guys do it, though, that's when it's bad. We do it, it's for freedom, and it's for, vaccines and double stuff. But no, when they do it, it's all about weapons and bad stuff. And all the point is, we'll use this to go after the people that we don't like everything the U.S. government pretty much has ever done. Israel will not be pointed to in this. Neither will Saudi Arabia or any of the others that are involved with whatever else you could point to. They are actively, all of these tools are going to be used against people that they don't like, their adversaries, which today include you. I think that's pretty obvious. So here is the article from NBC News. U.S. rejects international AI oversight at the UN General Assembly, excuse me. And so what this shows you is the same kind of conversation. Now, I'm not arguing that the U.S. should want to adhere to some kind of global adherence on artificial intelligence or anything for that matter. But what this shows me is it's more about the idea that, just like we talked about in the last in every one of the conversations, whether it's about continuing resolutions, whether it's about the NDAA, the idea that there are no oversight, as Lutnick already told you, would be the case regardless, that they're not allowing oversight. So people like Palantir, groups like Israel, can do whatever they want and however they want in AI, because that'll be better for industry. Who cares about the consequences, right? As you have genocidal maniacs out there rushing to use AI to murder children, right? But the point is that this is another pushback at oversight. That's how I look at this, and I think it's important to consider that. The United States clashes with world leaders over artificial intelligence at the United Nations General Assembly this week, rejecting calls for global oversight as many pushed for new collaborative frameworks. So he's literally saying we want to work with everybody at the United Nations to effectively create an AI biological convention, but yet we don't want you to check what we're doing. I just think that's a very weird way to put that. And it says, while Cristian shot down the idea, and this is just in regard to the director of the Office of Science and Technology policy, well, he shot down the idea of combined AI governance. Now, that's really about the idea of the government of the AI, not AI government, which is different. President Trump said in the speech to the General Assembly on Tuesday that the White House will be pioneering an AI verification system that everyone can trust. Right. So that would be the point, is that we'll do that. They'll create that, and then you'll all be bound to adhere to what our system says is the truth. That's how I very much read that. And it's how every other tool they've ever made is treated in the same way, like using Grok to manipulate government information that they can alter and tweak, and which they've done 7 times now. But yet they'll trust it now because whatever the new update from today, it says hopefully the UN can play a constructive role, and it will also be one of the early projects under AI. So as they're out there acting like he's bucking the system and calling out the UN, explain for me how exactly that's the case when you're proposing to work with the UN. I'm just so tired of this ridiculous game that's being played. And it's really just whether you choose to look. If you're blind enough to follow people like Jones that will lie right to your face, at some point you deserve that. And it says AI could be one of the greater things ever, or the great things ever. But it also can be dangerous, but it can be put to tremendous use. You gotta love that. It could be the best thing ever. Might be bad, but might be great. So which one do you think he wants, right? The bad shoved in the middle, or the fact that he keeps telling you to, it's something they're going to do regardless. But they love to kind of go, well, it could be bad, lip service and all. The statement to NBC News, a State Department spokesperson said the United States supports like-minded nations working together to encourage the development of AI in line with our shared values. Right. So all that means is we're going to circle the wagons about ours, and enemy states that we don't agree with ideologically or because Israel hates them, we'll make sure that they're boxed out of the snare. I mean, it's just a technocratic divide. And this will continue to become more obvious. It'll become more severe. And what do you think that's going to do? I'm not saying that people should be forced to. What they're doing is creating a tool that will be forced through global ideas, like we see Israel and the United States use the UN, for example. that then will be forced on people that are not in line with that idea. But see, if it was the other way around, well, the US and Israel would cry free, our freedom. You're infringing on our sovereignty. Well, yes, I would agree, but they do the same thing every day to every single person they don't like, including you today. I think I read the bottom of that. It says it says the U.S. position in international bodies is to vigorously advocate for international AI governance approaches that promote innovation, reflect American values, and counter authoritarian influence, except ours and Israel's and Saudi Arabia's and everybody else that we allow to be the worst authoritarians in the world. Though are okay, but not, but everyone else's, which aren't even close to that, but start to push back on our authoritarianism. And, oh, they're the fascists. End of the day, American values. So you want to force American perspectives on everyone in the world through your AI control structure, but don't want there to be some kind of a balance between other people's minds. I mean, this is the same kind of thing we keep talking about. If you want to talk about like American exceptionalism, well, that's an idea that we talk about within this country and how we, like the idea that we are ever projecting, forcing the way we see the world on any other country is always part of the problem. And didn't Trump tell you the last time he's elected that I won't be the policeman of the world? We're not going to, change, what was the other word he used? The ideological thing. Well, that's exactly what they all do. They do it every time. All these things are used to, these are tools going in the direction of the same problem. Now, again, same conversation. Trump rips UN's empty words, accuses it of assault on the West in fiery dress. So here's where you recognize words are one thing and actions are another. So maybe Jones and the rest need to really reflect on that point, because here we are where they simply go, oh, he said, last time at Davos, pronouns are stupid and they dunked on the bad guys, but they work there with them and they're aligned with them on every other agenda, including the vaccine agenda. But he said pronouns were bad, so he showed them. He's still working with them. It's just a very childish mentality. So it says Donald Trump unloaded on world leaders attending the United Nations Assembly on Tuesday, questioning the purpose of the international organization and ripping it for being behind empty words and underwriting an assault on Western countries through mass migration. Right. Which, again, there is some level of truth to what we're talking about there. But what's hilarious to me is that you can push back on that in any other context when it relates to the most obvious culprit. But then point this out as some broad UN thing toward only the United States, which again, if you understand the history, if you watch this show, I understand the point that's beneath that. But what they're trying to do is use it for their interests in places where it's really about control. And overall, ripping them for empty words and accusing them of creating weaponized migration, but yet let's work together, because that's what this is. Make sense of that for me. They're using fake immigration to overthrow our country, but let's make a deal because we could work together. As he says, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it was such tremendous potential. It's not even coming close to living up to all that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write really strongly worded letters and then never follow up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war, the president went on. Yes, right. So again, the point is what we just read, including even that as a secondary statement, is it has so much potential. We want to work together, which is ultimately what we're saying here. Which is hopefully the UN can play a constructive role and it'll be one of the early projects under AI. Okay, so if they're overthrowing your country with immigration, why would you want to make a deal with them to further your project? I could say it 16 different ways. If it's not sinking in for people out there, the reality is clearly that that's contradictory. But words are one thing and actions are another, right? So at the end of the day, they'll always be all bluster and hate, they're the bad guy and we'll go after them. But what they do is what matters. So as we just recently pointed out, AI is the new gain of function. And this was a really concerning show if you haven't seen this. The conversation of both the concern about average people and what they claim, a Grok can do by creating biological weapons, which is why Trump is having that conversation. They're literally building on these narratives. But the real issue was what they call BDTs, which is the institutional side of it. It's gain of function, and experts will tell you that. Now they're using AI to do the same thing, which is why I argue this was ever done in the first place. The whole executive order claiming to end gain of function, which all they really did was claim they're going to be the experts on the versions they like. Well, welcome to the AI gain of function, which is way, way worse. Just like, stable coins, way worse than CBDCs. But hey, we're winning because the first one didn't happen. All over the place, guys. Watch these shows. Now, lastly, just to recognize that you have, a video from RFK Jr., which he's been saying for quite a while. It'll make you a slave, digital currency that will allow the government to cut you off from you. And yep, and we all agree with that. This is concerned citizen sharing this on the 27th. Well, I said, well, hard to take this seriously as they quite literally roll those things out, right? This is not an opinion or conjecture. Their own reports make this clear, but sadly, many care more today about what the elitists yell out loud than they do their openly laid out plans and actions. Hashtag stablecoins. Doesn't that seem just the most logical thing in the world? And we can prove that's happening. But team sport politics wins the day. Now, before we get into the last two main topics, I think this is important to think about because this is where the left-right game comes into play, right? This is an article, again, coming from the UN point. Now, I'm going to say it right out of the gate. I don't think because they've held this close to the chest for that, which seems pretty weird. Because as you know, normally these things are dumped out everywhere they can when they want this to be when they want the mainstream alternative media to vomit in nonsense all day, so it gets really confusing. New York Post. Trump administration official physically assaulted by a United Nations General Assembly, or assaulted at the UN by deranged leftist, White House says. So there's many points to make about this. I'll read it first. Well, first, obviously, is the claim to be deranged leftist, which they would label against anybody that just acted against them. Just like we already see with Robinson and other ones we've already pointed to, which you could prove there is no provable connection to either left or right organizations. And pretty much everybody so far has been unregistered or independent or libertarian, and yet they'll force it in because, look, he wore a mask. Look, he said the word fascist. Well, that's your opinion. That's a subjective claim for somebody. I say fascist. Am I a liberal? No, I'm not. I think both sides are ridiculous. But either way, this is what they're claiming. On top of the fact that they seem to have not released the name of the person who they claim was arrested and already released. They're not releasing the name of the person, the official that the U.S. government says was harassed. Now, I'm not saying it's false. Very well could just be something they don't want you to dive into for other very clear reasons that maybe don't align with the agenda or that it's not actually a leftist. Either way, I don't know that because they won't release the information. It says a Trump administration official was physically assaulted by a deranged leftist inside the UN Thursday afternoon during the gathering of the General Assembly. And it says, quote, an HHS official, I'd love to find out who, was followed into a bathroom, recorded physically assaulted and verbally accosted by a deranged leftist at the UN who somehow entered the venue past multiple layers of security. That also seems an interesting point, right? Because the argument is what, deranged, terrorist level, people breaking and secure UN, like there's an overlap to all this. And it very well could just be somebody who was angry with them and decided to go ahead and yell at them. Does that then make it a left terrorism problem? Even if they're a lefty? No, it does not. It could, but then wouldn't you need to prove that? Present some kind of actual tangible evidence where the judge could say, yes, I can see a network of people planning violence, and here's cases they've acted it out. No, it never happens that way. Not today, because it's all about narrative and floating a general concept to, justify government action in a more broad way with really unverifiable claims. But freedom, though, right? And it goes on to say, White House press secretary pointed this out. Thankfully, the official is safe and the lunatic was arrested. But this is a part of a disturbing and dangerous set of failures by the UN, UN Hamas, right? After their sabotage of President Trump, because we've proven that? No, we haven't. So a escalator didn't work and his prompter didn't work, but it also didn't work for 3 major speeches calling out Israel. But so if you're going to claim, so how does that make sense? Or maybe they just had glitches that day, or maybe they attacked all of them. The point is, shouldn't we care to prove those things before they continue to make a statement? No, that doesn't matter today, not for politics. Kelly told Fox News Digital that the U.S. Secret Service will investigate how this violent protester was admitted. So if nothing ever comes of this, I'm calling BS. If no name is ever pointed out, if there's nothing, it's either, my opinion, BS or not or lefty, and they'll cover it up. The source familiar told Fox News Digital that the individual has been charged with assault, aggravated harassment, attempted assault, and criminal possession of a weapon. So you're telling me somebody carries a weapon into the United Nations General Assembly and accosts a HHS official in the bathroom, and that's not a gigantic story all over the news? We would know the person's name. Something's clearly off about this. I'm not saying I definitely know. I've made that clear. I'm telling you my gut instinct, which is that they've lied a lot, just like left and right governments lie to you like they breathe. To me, this just doesn't add up. And we've seen them very clearly try to force in a false narrative over things that you can prove. But it says the individual was released from custody. So somebody out there would have information that there'd be public things you could find. I can't find anything. Now, if you found something over the last couple hours, maybe it's developed. But this article is from yesterday. So my point is this would have already happened. It says they're expected in court on the 13th. But no name, no mention of them or the official. The official tried to get away from the woman who was screaming derogatory and pro-Palestinian comments. This checks all the boxes, doesn't it? The official said the woman called her a fascist and a Nazi. Literally every box. So who knows? Maybe. But I think it's very interesting how this is just a thing that they screamed out that seems to accentuate all the different points they're making. Why wouldn't they talk about this? Why wouldn't they plaster this person's face everywhere? The logical point would be either they're not really lefty and they just used it because that makes sense for their narrative, or it didn't happen at all. But I'd like to see. So if it turns out to be exactly what it looks like, I never said, the point is we don't know for sure, but I'm sure they'll all pile on and be like, yeah, we'll accuse them. No, that's not what we do on this show. Giving you my opinions. But overall, I think you know as well as I that they've been caught lying many, many, many times. So as we just even literally highlighted them lying about very benign, unimportant things. Suspect in North Carolina restaurant shooting identified. Charged with murder after 3 killed, at least 5 wounded. Now, what I found really interesting about this story, this is reported today. I believe the shooting happened yesterday. Why wasn't discussed? I mean, if this was a very clear lefty person, which let's be clear right out of the gate, neither of these stories, I think you can yet prove definitively what their political standing was. And that matters to me. I don't care if the guy's wearing a red hat out there hunting, whatever else. Guys, if you, the reality that you could pretend by the way somebody looks, yeah, I get it. There's very clear leanings. But I know plenty of people who identify other ways than what they clearly look like. And really, I believe most people are somewhere in the middle of that, and we're still forcing in these fake constructs of left and right because it keeps people under their thumb. My point, though, is that unless you can prove that, so he voted as a left or right person, which neither of these people have, or he's out there saying this publicly in some kind of a statement, wrote something like that, or is literally affiliated with some kind of an organization. Those things don't exist. So these screaming idiots out there who want you to believe he's a lefty, we know it. He's on the right, we can tell. It's all the same thing. So here's what's important. This is from Fox News. A suspect has been charged after a gunman opened fire from a boat into the waterfront restaurant in North Carolina, killing 3 people and wounding at least 5 others. It's a tragedy, guys. It's horrible. The idea that we need to say that for that to be accepted, it bothers me. It almost to the point to where I don't want to come out and be I condemn the bad thing that we should condemn. And I'm sad. Right? Okay, let's move forward. Because I am. I know that. I don't care what people think about what I'm supposed to feel about something. My past record, my track record, what I do every day shows compassion and empathy for anybody, left or right, for families of people that are suffering. Anybody. Just like we said about Charlie Kirk's family, regardless of the position we think about his politics. Family were suffering. That has to matter to people. So my point is that when you talked about I pointed this out about the shooting at the Mormon church. And I simply said, you guys are misrepresenting this point. And somebody comes in and attacks me because I don't care. I don't believe in God because how dare I point as if they know everything I'm thinking. The point is a single and obvious point. The projection of somehow how dare they come out and accuse me of not believing in God because I made a point that's accurate, but I didn't say the thing first that I'm supposed to say. It's all fake, guys. Every time they stand up and go, I condemn the thing, it's because this is a cycle they all go through. Do you think any of them actually care? Maybe. Historically shows you they don't. Whether or not you think that, the point is the fact that people make the idea that you're supposed to put on this ritual every time and come on, it's about my personal feelings. I care about these things because I have empathy for human beings. I don't feel the need to put on a song and dance about how I care about these things before I talk about them. I think that's self-evident in the work that we do. Regardless, don't care what you think. A suspect has been charged after a gunman fired from a boat. Nigel Max Edge, 40 years old, was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 5 counts of attempted first-degree murder in connection with the shooting at an American Fish Company restaurant in Southport, North Carolina. The city's public information officer confirmed to Fox News on Sunday morning. It says Southport Police Chief Todd Coring told reporters at a press conference later Sunday morning that the suspect acted alone in a highly predetermined fashion. That's interesting. Not some random thing, is what they're claiming. Even when you get into it, it seems there might be some sort of a PTSD kind of point. But either way, they're claiming it was not some reaction or some kind of lost your mind point, but a highly premeditated, planned thing. So they're saying, question police officers like you do anybody else, because just like anybody else, they're capable of lying, deceiving, everything else that anybody else is capable of. Not to insinuate that that's the case. It says, we believe that this was a targeted location, Coring said, adding that the suspect is in custody and there is believed to be no further threat to the community. Southport's public information officer previously said a boat with a single occupant on the Cape Fear River paused briefly in front of the restaurant at around 9:30 and opened fire, killing 3 patrons and injuring multiple others. The boat then sped off in the direction of the intercoastal waterway towards neighboring Oak Island. The U.S. Coast Guard observed a single individual matching the description of the shooter loading their boat on a public ramp in Oak Island shortly after 10 p.m. The Coast Guard crew detained the person, who was turned over to Southport police for questioning. Now, it says Coring said the suspect identified himself as a combat veteran who was injured in the line of duty and suffers from PTSD. Fox News Digital could not immediately confirm those claims. Well known to the local police. Now, exactly what that means, I think we'll flesh out more. There's one point about it, but he was apparently well known to the local police. And at first you might think because he's working with them, but it seems he was calling them out and suing them and stuff. But it says he didn't have any significant criminal background. The suspect had filed numerous lawsuits against the police department in the town in the recent years. So it just, there's different points that you could pretend are aligning with what side you want to see. He says authorities did not immediately release the names of those killed. So when you look at this story, to me, it's easy to pretend it's one, oh, look, he's, a veteran and he's, whatever. The point is that nobody can prove for sure. And that's the honest thing to do, is to say, and really, let's just say he was left or right. The idea that the game is to then make that about the entire side, how did we ever let that stupidity start? Whether you think there is, prove these things or shut up. I'm just tired of these people out there screaming about, oh, every single person is a Nazi or every single one of them is a terrorist. When everybody somewhere knows that can't possibly be the truth, but we all just let them scream and keep gaining their millions of followers and profiting from the Twitter cycle. It's just wild to me. We'll probably find out somewhere or the other, but when you look further, as this says, not affiliated with the Republican or Democratic Party according to voter records, which are right here. Nigel Max Edge's North Carolina voter registration, which the fact that we can look this up is crazy to me, how lacking in privacy we have. But he was born in 1994 and listed as no political party affiliation. But yet they're all making their claims anyway. Actually, this one is getting less attention than any, but there are some of them out there. To me, I think it's because it's easy to see this as right because of veteran, which is, I think people just ignored it. Or rather because they chose one that they could use more than the other. Now you may be offended by that, but you know as well as I that people on the partisan game use stories like this every day. And then when you come out and accurately discuss these stories, accuse you of being insensitive as they lie about people, like Charlie Kirk, for example, or use his name to go after people for saying things they don't like, as if that's not inherently insulting to Charlie's memory. But this story got very little attention. I just find that very telling, don't you? Why wouldn't that have been discussed? It's identical to what we're going over right now, but it didn't get discussed. You can decide why. Now, here's the new one from today. And again, this is especially a sad story, obviously, because they're talking about people that were in the process of going to church and with, children and families. And really for me, the reason I'm even accentuating that is because we're talking about people that were not only shot at, but then ultimately that there was a family and children that got separated and trapped inside. And this is still developing information. And apparently somehow the building caught on fire. People are claiming they know that it was set by the shooter. I can't seem to verify that. And apparently there are people trapped in there. That's a really horrifying story. It says 1 dead, 9 injured in Michigan church shooting. Arguably, I think people are claiming the second person has been killed. And it says shooter down, building on fire. So at least one person has died. Now, again, if you have any major updates, let me know in the chat. At least one person has died and 9 others were injured in the mass shooting. As I said, the reports are going around that a second person has now died, but again, 9 others were pretty severely injured. And a mass shooting and a fire that occurred in a church in the central Michigan community of Grand Blanc on the morning of Sunday, September 28th. Now, right out of the gate, people came out and used this to claim this was an attack on Christianity. Now, I'll go over it yet in a second. Regardless of what you may think or what Johnsons are telling you, Benny Johnson or whether else are out there trying to lie to you about, the truth is that's not Christianity, guys. I can prove this to you in very basic ways. And this is not even like a religious point. It's just a fact about the differences between the two. Now, yes, I can just you can argue many other things are offshoots of this, does not then make them the adherent idea of Christianity. I mean, you could even argue that about other different, it doesn't even matter. The point is I can prove this in a second in a very, very basic way. My point is, though, you have people coming out and yelling that this is an attack on Christianity because that's the current narrative. And I argue they didn't even look They didn't even look or do their due diligence, or worse, they don't understand the difference. But it says a 40-year-old man drove his vehicle through the front doors of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, a suburb of Flint, Michigan. That town, it's just Flint, Michigan. Still, it doesn't have clean water, by the way. According to Grand Blanc Township Police Chief William Rain, he then exited the vehicle and fired several rounds at people inside the church. Rain said this afternoon at a conference. 10 victims with gunshot wounds, including one victim who was pronounced deceased, were transported to local hospitals during the incident. The Mormon church was also engulfed in flames, and police said they believe there will be more victims because there were people inside the building near the fire that couldn't get out. It says responding officers engaged in gunfire with the suspect, according to Rain, which is interesting seeing as how there were people still in there. It says the suspect is no longer with us, Rain said. Police identified the suspect in the shooting as a deceased man from Burton, but they didn't release the name, but apparently that name has been put out by New York Post. But knowing how ridiculous that platform is, we should probably take it with a grain of salt, but it doesn't mean that's false. Police said they will be conducting search warrants on the suspect's residence and will look into cell phone records. Several law enforcement agencies were assisting local authorities in the investigation, including 100 FBI agents. Surprising that Kash Patel didn't dump evidence on Twitter this time. Michigan State Police and ATF. I mean, realize that just like right now, like we saw before, was the effort to dump in something that would make it into a partisan discussion. And without that piece of weirdly inserted evidence that I don't think we can even necessarily prove was part of everything, there's a lot of weird anomalies to it all. Everything else, like we keep showing you, even if it did say anti-ICE and that was actually done by the person, that even alone does not then prove somebody is part of one side or the other. Again, I think ICE is disgustingly obviously like a Gestapo force today. That doesn't make me calling for violence. It's just simply me, a person understanding what it is. And it's obvious to prove this. It's not left or right. I think both sides are equally ridiculous in the team sport game. The point is, by saying that does not make you one side or the other. Wearing a mask does not make you one side or the other. I've seen both sides do it. Trump wore a mask, for crying out loud. But it's all about the assumptive layer they can put over the top to shove in their narrative. Now it says, in a Truth Social post, Donald Trump said that the FBI immediately responded to the scene. The FBI will be leading the federal investigation into the shooting and will provide full support to state and local officials. Now, when the FBI is instantaneously on the scene, that raises suspicion for me. When you have undeniable evidence of the FBI manufacturing events, or in many cases, having direct contact with these shooters before they then going to do it. And it's not about saying they should have arrested him for no reason. It's not what I'm implying. But the point is that it's weird, and you should wonder whether there's something beyond that. About, like any other examples where they basically allow these people to carry these things out for certain agendas, and the idea is maybe they were supposed to stop them before it happened and they failed, and then they just pretend they weren't involved. That has literally happened more than once. So the suspect is dead, they write, but there is still a lot to learn, Trump said in the post. But this appears to be yet another targeted attack on Christians. Donald Trump said that, despite being a Mormon church. So it's all about narrative, guys. It's about inserting the narrative the way you want to sell it. Oh, and also the leader of the church died apparently yesterday. And I'll go over some posts that I don't have them right here. Some posts here, like, for example, this is one of the series that Derek did. I'll include in the show notes, called the Utah Ritualized Sexual Abuse Investigation. And this is largely about that overlap of this issue, the direct investigation, as well as the Mormon church in general. And this is the guy they're talking about right here. The title of this is Utah Ritualized Sexual Abuse Investigation, the Mormon Church, and Child Sexual Abuse. The man in that picture, who is, in my personal opinion, a criminal. And you can read the information for yourself, the accusations that go back a long way. He passed away. So the point is that maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's some more story to it. But to me, that just looks like another data point, at least for now. Now, this is what I find really important in all this. Robert James Smith identified as the Michigan Latter-day Saint, the Mormon church shooter, because Grok names Singer as suspect and then goes, oops, apologize for the glitch. So this is the Grok that's currently informing our government? That's how insane this has gotten, guys. This says Grand Blanc Township Police Chief William Rain confirmed in a press conference that the shooter was 40-year-old man from Burton, Michigan, who we'll get to in a second, at least the reports of him, who was shot and killed at the police scene following a brief exchange of gunfire. His name has not been yet released. It's right here, actually. We'll come back. Thomas, I guess Jake might be a secondary name. Thomas Jake Sanford. That's the report from New York Post. But it says, shortly after the incident, Twitter users began sharing a quote from Grok, which inaccurately named the shooter as the lead singer of The Cure. I mean, how is that even possible, guys? That's not an accident. To me, that's either some kind of deliberate troll that's done by Grok and Elon Musk and Twitter, or somebody is able to manipulate that, even by just dumping fake information on Twitter, which shows you how absurd it is that this is the kind of thing that they're using to run our government and is completely overlapped with Israel and any number of very obvious problems with the AI conversation. That's like, what's the right word for it? Like, out was the beyond the pale is what I was looking for. Like, that is so far. The Cure, the singer, I mean, and not only that that's the case, but that then got circulated without due diligence by everybody because Grok said. Now, it says in an initial post, Grok stated a 40-year-old man identified as Robert James Smith rammed his car into the church, and it's just the rest of the story. Open fire, gunshot victims, police exchanged gunfire with Smith, who died at the scene. Now, what if somebody went and took action against Robert James Smith? Would that be the accountability of, well, here's an interesting actual point right here. Now we're talking about a program, not a person. So maybe you could arguably say that the platform was responsible for that by putting out the information that led to his death. Now, I would simply argue that the real way to deal with that would be, and my always point is to keep the government out of it, to sue them for that. And I guarantee you a judge would see the logic in that. But see, that's the point. The government getting involved, even when it comes to something like that, I would argue is not necessary. But it says the post circulated widely before Grok issued a correction. And it says, oops, that's a glitch on my end. Robert James Smith is the lead singer of The Cure, not involved in any shooting. The actual suspect is in today's Michigan church incident hasn't been named yet. Thanks for the heads up. I'll debug that. You'll debug that? God, that's just a story in and of itself, guys. But it'll be quickly overlooked as they roll it into our government. Now, the quartering comes out and says the American flag. Oh, and by the way, there was reports of American flags being in the back of the truck that drove into the building. The American flags, he writes, on the church shooter's truck is maybe the most obvious op in history. I bet there's still folds in them. This will end up being lefty trying to frame the right. This is put out before anybody knows what's happening. Now, I wouldn't stretch anything. I would not go as far as to call this person a journalist, but influences a ton of people with 407,000 followers. And plenty more when you look on his other platforms. The reality is that this is just your projecting of your personal opinion as absolute fact. And the reality is, as we'll get into the information, American flag very much lines up with who this person appears to be. I'm not even suggesting that means he's Republican or even conservative, because I can't prove that. But for him to come out and say that shows you the kind of blind following adherence to my team's narrative that everyone's pushing. Of course, people like Alex Jones come out and say, an active shooting terror attack just took place in the Church of Latter-day Saints in Michigan. The terrorist rammed his truck through the front of the large church, then began shooting attendees and set fire to the church, which I can't prove, and I don't think he can either. But that's the narrative that Loomer puts out, so they all repeat it. And it says, and I'm not even saying false. What I'm saying is that they put things out before they can confirm them every single day. And it says, he says, I would give it a 98% probability that it's an Islamist or an Antifa-affiliated nut job. Great. An Antifa, Trantifa, an Islamist, Antifa, Trantifa affiliated nut job. Because that all perfectly overlaps, right? Let's just jam it all together. Okay. And be 98%, somebody turns out to be inevitably false, then it'll just go, well, I didn't say it completely. Okay. Well, here he is. According to New York Post, which is important to point out. So, and again, since it is New York Post, maybe we should take, before we take it at face value, we should, pull back. But as I said, as we should do always regardless, right? Question everything. But it says New York Post names Grand Blanc church shooter as Thomas Jake Sanford, an Iraq War veteran. Police say the gunman crashed into a Michigan church, opened fire, and set it ablaze, killing 2 people now and injuring 9. Okay, well, you see, now, if we were playing the game the same way the ridiculous partisans were, we would jump out and go, obviously Republican, right? And I could obviously point out that seems likely, more likely, I guess, than, somebody with a purple haircut and a pink hat, right? But I don't know that. And we're not ridiculous enough to make those claims like most of the partisan team sport politics. Hopefully we can start to put, what's that word I'm looking for? Hopefully what we're doing in that way, I can't think of the right words for it, by being objective, will filter through the rest of the conversation and start showing average people why we shouldn't be as clownish as these partisans out there. That even though it benefits them wildly, hopefully we care more about the truth. which is what they all pretend they're fighting for. So you can decide for yourself. Now, if this was a person doing the same things but had a pink hat on with a mask or whatever else, they would already be screaming lefty, like they already are, by the way, before they even knew what was happening. How does that not make the case for you, right? That should be enough right there. The fact that they were screaming, or that they told you the same thing before. They screamed who he was before we even knew who was arrested with Charlie Kirk. So here's Kash Patel. We are tracking reports of the horrific shooting and the fire at LDS Church. FBI agents are on the scene to assist local authorities. Violence in a place of worship is a cowardly and criminal act. I agree. Our prayers are with the victims and their families during this terrible tragedy. I agree. Here is NBC News. Church attack leaves 1 dead, 9 injured. Now, this was just, again, I just had this up from before. This is the image I was using before, just to show you that it's Church of Latter-day Saints, which we already know. And here is a slew of people coming out and screaming it's a Christian discussion, or a Christianity's under attack. Okay, so let's make this point clear. First, I said, without even a glance at the facts, Bennett Johnson uses the story uses this story to use for his agenda. Only issue, it's a Latter-day Saints church, not a Christian church. Now, not sure why anybody takes these team sport politics partisans seriously. And this was the point I think is important. I made this point for a reason. The only point being made here is the lack of due diligence. Not that I'm, not anything other than that point. That's all. So people that are coming under this and saying, well, maybe I posted 75 times somewhere else about how tragic it was and how much I care. Not that that's even necessary, because I do care. I don't need to verify myself to people on Twitter. But the point, same thing. I just wanted to get to the explanation. So very quickly, all the others doing the same. Eric Doherty, Christianity under attack. Same thing. All these fake patriots will jump on whatever they are told or whatever they feel will benefit their agenda, likely both. This is a Mormon church. And, Doom does his own due diligence on this. Just quick search. And again, these are things that you could easily prove for yourself. As he simply asked, are Mormons Christians? Then it says, no. Mormons, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, do not worship the same God as traditional Christians, primarily because differing views on the nature of the Godhead. This is where it becomes important. While both groups worship Jesus Christ, Mormons view the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as distinct beings with individual bodies, whereas traditional Christianity believes the Godhead is one being existing in 3 persons. You can't pretend those are the same thing. Now, look, I'm not saying one bad, one good. Let's not be children about this. It is not Christianity. It's just simply not the reality. And here's the point you can look up for yourself, which I was trying to show people, which is the Latter-day Saint Church quite literally teaches that humans can become gods in the afterlife. Look it up for yourself. How do you think that? Does that align with Christian beliefs? The problem is all these people are out here pushing this because it's a partisan agenda, or maybe don't even know that they're being misled by Nick Shorter, Betty Johnson, and Alex Jones, and all the rest. As Sasha Latipova backs me up and says, can I please remind everyone that Mormons are not real Christians? It's a sect, a very successful one. However, I am not sorry that they got attacked, and I mourn for all real victims. Excuse me, I just to the podcast, she says, I am very sorry they got attacked, and I mourn for all real victims. A slip of the tongue. The point she's making is simply not like somehow ungodly, just not as a defining point, not Christian. They're not Christians. Just like you could argue Judaism, Jews are not Christians, right? But you could argue both stem from it's a manipulation. And my point, I don't even think this is because they actually think that. I think it's because they jumped into it to scream the agenda without even double checking the story, which is what they do every single day. So Nick says the same thing. Attacks on Christians has to end. No, there's no Christians there, bud. And it says it's horrible, but this is not a Christian church, Lizzie points out. It's a Mormon church. Nice folks, not Christians. Praying for them. And Nick says Mormonism is a sect of Christianity. See where this goes? They believe in Jesus Christ. That doesn't make them Christians, you understand? So too do a lot of other religions that are not Christians. But either he doesn't know that, which is insane for a Republican right fighting for Christianity or whatever they're framing themselves as today, or he's lying to you. He goes, it's literally in the name, Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints. Well, I said, you're an absolute moron. The real question is, do you actually believe that, which speaks volumes about you, or are you just pushing it since you're too feckless to admit that you're wrong? You can't tell me that believing that humans can become gods aligns with Christianity, or the very clear point of the Godhead discussion about the difference there. They're not, you just can't. And I want to be stressing this, guys. This is not a point of religion. This is not a religion. I mean, other than that is about religion. I'm not making this a religious point. It's a factual point that you can look up for yourself. Nick Shirley, You can't see this and not think to yourself, is Christianity under attack? This is just the agenda, guys. It's what's happening right now. And I'm not even trying to say alternatively that Christianity is not under attack. You can decide that for yourself. That's not the point we're getting into right now. The point is that these people are misrepresenting this like they do everything, just like both sides of the paradigm do, because that's the game. That's just the same thing. Just posted those down below. They can read for themselves. Walter Kurt comes out and says, I leave mass hearing about the shooting and arson attack in a church in Michigan. To all Christians everywhere, if 95% of men in your church are not carrying, then you must fix that. Christianity is being attacked. Be prepared to defend yourself, family, and community. Now, look, I have no problem with anybody carrying a gun since that's your constitutional right, whether it's in church or not. But the idea that you're pushing this idea that we need to be on guard defending yourself, you should be kind of aware of your surroundings and protecting yourself anywhere, all the time. But you're pushing fear and anxiety. We're under attack and they're coming for us. And what you're really pointing at is Muslims. That's what this comes down to for most of these people when you break it down. And this one is Eric Doherty saying the same thing, Christianity. And this person points out that Trump said Christians as well, which we already saw. Even Donald Trump comes out and says that. So James Lee rightly points out, whichever way the story develops, the mainstream media, which by the way, absolutely includes the mainstream alternatives that we just pointed to, because that's what he's pointing to, whether he agrees with that, that's what he's referencing right here. Those kind of people that are doing that already, they will use it to flame cultures, right? The ideological battle, the culture war they claim is only the left that they both participate in. Guaranteed, he says, don't fall into the trap. James sees it. Now he says, I'm not familiar with her, by the way, but I followed her to see what if he's correct about her ongoing work. And it does seem to be measured. And she says, or he writes, follow independent journalists like Anna R. Matson for the Real News. Here's what she said since he referenced her.
Scene of a giant fire happening at a church in Grand Blanc, Michigan. I talked to someone who just got here from South America. It's his first week in the U.S., went to church with his mom. His mom is still in the building and he got out. From what I'm hearing on the ground, a man drove his vehicle into the church and then started shooting and even shot a little girl in the back, and she is at the hospital right now. The shooter has been neutralized, but that's all I know at the moment. Everyone within a 30-minute radius has responded to the scene.
Right. So the guy, the South American there, I'm sure, people like Laura Loomer would look at him and be like, that's probably a Muslim who attacked everybody. Like that's the kind, and that's not even a joke. I'll show you some examples right now. The kind of thing that they will project onto any conversation because people have a certain religion. She's the one that literally said, why do we allow Muslims in Congress? So let's not pretend like she doesn't broadly think every Muslim is a terrorist. She says it every day. That's the common thread in a lot of this. People like her are kind of dry. I mean, what's funny is they all kind of pretend like they're not near her because she's just that ridiculous on just an objective level from everybody. Even people like Tucker Carlson had to distance themselves because she's a lunatic. But driving the thread here comes from the idea that people are invading our country, which you can decide for that. If that's the case, you can care or not, whether or not that might be happening. I care about facts. And I pointed out many times about the reality of weaponized migration and very clear foreign countries involved in that. Nonetheless, is there a crime? If so, charge them for that crime. We just talked yesterday about the illusion of political violence, the new hate speech on the right. That's what this is. The idea that you somehow make it a different lens or construct some larger barrier. So if someone breaks the law and then you go, but all 17 of you are politically violently organized, so we're going to get all terrorists, even though what you did was protest and break a window or whatever. Arrest them for vandalism. Arrest them for what you think the crime was. Everything else is an overreach of the government on either side. And all they do is build the construct to keep pushing back and forth until we completely lose everything. That's where we are right now. So if you think there's a Muslim invasion of this country, maybe you're right. Prove it. Break it down. Show us what's happening. Get people to investigate and charge them with the crime. If you think the entire government's involved, then prove that. Don't keep giving us insinuations about broad things, which is what they're actually doing. Now, those out there will try to pretend like, oh, I'm just never going to accept it. I care about this left and right. I call all sides out equally. People who aren't children can see that. And so I want to see it. If you could prove to me that you have, I don't care whether it's from anything. I would not care, regardless of what the evidence showed. If I could prove it, it would be reported on this platform. I think that's important to think about. Now, going forward, last two things I want to get into is this same conversation, this part and then the Muslim focus. You get people like this. Johnny Maga comes out. So here's another shooting. By the way, before we even know what's happening, and now that the person is at least visually looking more right, they start pulling their punches, they start ignoring it, right? But he says, Kamala last night, we must fight fire with fire, which is a very common statement that the right has made many, many times. And he goes, this morning in Michigan, a terrorist opened fire. My God. Is there any indication that there was any connection? No. Now, and the further you look, not even remotely. But even if it ends up being a connection, the idea that you're trying to turn in her words into the violence, then you're a snowflake. You are the very left that you were calling out before. Words are not violence. And whether or not she literally said, go do that, I would still argue that there's no crime outside of the person who commits, an actual crime. Are we now at the point where even, this is what we're going to discuss on the 30th, by the way. We're having a panel about free speech with the IMA. And I actually argue my stance on that will probably be an unpopular opinion, but I'm doing it for a very clear principled reason. If somebody comes out and says, go kill that person, do you think that's a crime? I'd argue half my audience probably does. I'm not even sure where I fall in regard to what it should be, but I think the principle has to be aired on right now. And so if somebody says something like that, what if they're joking? What if they didn't mean it? What if it was meant to scare you? Who knows? Because the point is speech is never violence. And speech is not a crime. Hate speech is not a real thing. Political violence, it's a construct over these real things. There is speech and there is violence. The rest of it are political lenses. And so if somebody says something like that, the action, the crime that does it, that's the issue. Now, you could argue that person is irresponsible. And if you think that their actions led to that, then sue them. I'd be willing to bet you a judge would probably argue the same. The government getting involved is the problem. And the fact that we blend all that together and get lost in all the minutia, that's what they designed this for. But she said, fight fire with fire, which how much you want to bet, though, that clip? Just by the way things have been going, the clip's probably from a different, I'm just kind of joking off the top of my head, probably from 6 years ago or something. But even if it was today or yesterday, the idea that you can claim that's related is just exactly what we're calling out everywhere. And Micah then says the suspect is a 40-year-old white man, gun owner, who had 2 American flags attached to his truck. Right? But Coring's already laid the idea down that somehow that can't be real because it can't be the right, except that kind of seems to be the reality right now. But blame Kamala because that's the narrative, right? Or, again, Donald Trump Jr. says he knows exactly what he's doing when Gavin Newsom's press office says Stephen Miller's a fascist. Yeah, he's calling him a fascist. Do I think Gavin Newsom's a good guy? No, I think he's also a fascist. But the idea that him calling you a fascist is he knows wink, wink what he's doing. You're a bro flake. Donald Trump Jr. is a bro flake. He's the woke right. What it actually means, he's using culture war, cancel culture ideas to claim that saying something, whether real or not, is actually the problem. So he's trying to get him killed, go after him. They're the same. That's what this comes down to. And here's Mike Speranza saying this is why people get shot. Because Stephen Miller the fascist? Or because they said that? Okay, well, here's the same point every single time that none of them want to admit. Then if that's the problem, then is this also a problem, guys?
American politics today is between these far-left fascists led by Harris and her group. We have a fascist person running who's incompetent. She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. She's not actually a socialist. She's gone past that. Somebody's got to explain this woman. There's a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
Right. Okay. He has every right to say that. In fact, I agree. But if you're over here saying the word means that you're calling for violence, then what about Donald Trump? Are we going to apply it equally? Well, no, Ryan, because there actually are fascists. Oh, okay. Right. So you're all children. My idea is the correct one, and there's the false one, no matter what my subjective opinion. This is problematically what there's people that believe that is enough, like Kevin McInnes, apparently. They did it to me, I'm going to do it back, and I'm justified. Maybe you are justified. It doesn't change the fact that it makes you the same thing. If you cared about the principle, and if you cared about free speech, for example, then you wouldn't do it back. All you're showing is that it's more important to you to go after the other side, just like they did to you, just like they rationalized against you, because you wanted to do it back. Sad. It really is sad to me. And I'd like to believe most people are aware that this is ridiculous. So the overlap to this, which, by the way, let's remember, okay, we have a white man who shot a Latter-day Saint church. At what point does this overlap with a Muslim conversation? You want to make that clear for me? Well, here's Laura Logan. It is the real point here. The fact that a complex attack was carried out against a Christian target right after Al-Qaeda publicly instructed their supporters to focus on Christian churches and schools. Oh, except that it wasn't a Christian school. It was a Latter-day Saint school. So let that reflect on Laura Logan's due diligence. And then also ask yourself how that connects. A white 40-year-old man, again, according to New York Post, make sure you don't forget that. But as it currently is, and as everyone's, that's already flooded through the conversation, and you could already visibly watch the right start to counter away from it. Why? Is it possible Al-Qaeda was working? Yes, especially since Israel and the United States use Al-Qaeda as their proxy element, and maybe they work with all. That's, I'm making a point, but I can't prove that either in regard to this point. And on top of that, the reason I do bring that up is because we can't forget Al-Qaeda is not what they claim it is. And see, I just need to bring it up because it's only going to water down the point for people that might not know this and think it's crazy. It's quite literally the most easy thing to prove in the conversation. It is obvious that ISIS and Al-Qaeda were proxy elements created by intelligence. James Corbett, Ben Swan, plenty of amazing documentaries that nailed that to the wall with receipts that you cannot deny. My point, though, is that understanding that then changes what it means when Al-Qaeda stands up and says, go after the Christians. Overwhelmingly clear, though, is that there's nothing that connects these two things at all. Unless you're telling me that this white 40-year-old man, if it turns out to be provably the guy, was acting because Al-Qaeda told him to go after Christians, but then mistakenly went after a Mormon church. But let's just yell the narrative anyway, right, guys? Here is Wall Street Apes. Now, this is interesting to me because this is all being constructed around this. Now, I'm going to make a point to, at some point, go further into, and if there's anybody out there who lives specifically in Dearborn, Michigan, reach out to me with whatever you have to say, whether you are telling me that you're being invaded by Muslims or you think that it's not, or somewhere in the middle. I'd like to hear more about it because I find this very problematic with where we are today, with what's happening. I don't mean that in the sense of just Muslims existing in this country. Let me make this point with this clip. And then let me break down quickly what RAIR is right next to MEMRI. So this is right now, this is overlapping with what happened in this Latter-day Saints church only because they claim Muslims are involved somehow with all of this. And this was being constructed before we found out the narrative about the 40-year-old white guy. Dearborn, Michigan chief of police speaks in Arab, he says. And all praise due to Allah. Yeah, it appears that he's a Muslim. He proudly talks of replacing the American Dearborn police force with Arabs, not even, I'll play it for you. I'll make it clear what he's actually saying, or he does with what he actually says. This is the way they're framing it. The police force went from 3% Arabs to 45% Arab Muslims, or Arabs. The assumption they're all Muslims is the bigotry of the people pointing this out. Because there's plenty of Muslims that are not, or rather Arab, or vice versa. It's very clear, guys. The crazy thing is that they will just make the case because they have a certain opinion they're pushing. This is what being conquered looks like. Okay, maybe. And I mean that genuinely. Maybe there's more to this that I'm not being able to see, or I should make it clear that the evidence does not back up. And the subjective narrative is the truth, and I can't prove that. That is certainly possible. Especially when you understand the very real threat of Israel and the way that they've conducted these kind of agendas all around the world for a very long time. Or if you listen to them speak in the Knesset about why this country needs to collapse to bring on the end times and how that needs to happen with the West flooding with immigration. I'm quite literally quoting what they're telling you in scripture or from the Knesset politics. But who cares? Let's ignore that while this happens. They point at one group. Here's what he actually said.
Joined the department, Dearborn's Arab American population was nearly 50%.
Okay, first point. He joins the department in a location in this country that is 50% Arab, not Muslim, Arab.
The Arab American population was nearly 50%.
Okay. So do we forget what we're supposed to pretend democracy is in this country? Or does it only apply when it's white people, right? Or is it like international law unless Israel, or whatever your weird little asterisks are about the things that shall not be infringed? Now, I'm not claiming I believe in mob rule, but the game that we play in this country is that democracy is the most important threat to democracy, right? Well, what that means is that if you've got 50% Arabs, not Muslims, now there's an overlap very clearly, and maybe it is 50%. My point is that we don't know that for a fact. Some of them are atheists, probably, but the point is 50%. Okay, well, they're voters that live in this state. So the fact that they want, and this, I would even argue this is sort of a lefty mindset that it needs to be diverse and represent the people. I think it should be about who's the most merit, who's the best for the job. Always, I mean, that is the most logical stand, but that they can decide in their state. So he's saying he wants the representation is now reflecting what the community is. Now, why is that bad? That's only bad because they don't like that it's Arabs, and their insinuation is because they're Arabs, therefore they're all terrorists. Or possibly some, yeah, certainly possible. Can you prove that for me? I'll wait. If you can prove to me, I'll talk about it happily, because the reality would be that would be a very big deal. But I think we all can very clearly see that the Loomers of the world are patching together, you're Muslim, therefore you're bad. That's it. There's not even any connective tissue in there. And so here he is telling you that when he came in, 50% of the population were Arabs.
Yet less than 3% of our police. Now a department that reflects an.
Now, here's what's funny. The way they cut this video was very deliberate to kind of what he was continuing to say there, but yet when I came in, it was only 3% of representation in the department. That's what he was saying. So the point was he wants to make it reflect what the community is. Whatever you think about that, that's not crazy.
Embraces the community it serves. Yet less than 3% of our police. Now a department that reflects and embraces the community it serves.
Yeah, it's now a department that reflects the community that it serves. It's the same point in reverse of people on the right saying that they want white representation because that reflects their community, which I don't think is that crazy. I think the idea of the racism game is about, the point would be it's about what the community can decide for themselves. So it's funny that that's okay there, but this is bad here. Why? Because Muslim bad, Arab bad. Not secret, guys. It's pretty easy to see. It's our government has been seeding this through us, arguably because of Israel, for our entire lives. Happened during 9/11. It happened about Russia. Happened about any number of groups. They want to go evil, bad guy, villain. Now Palestinians are dehumanized. It happens every time they have an agenda.
With 45% of our officers being Arab American.
Right. Okay. So the way they tried to dishonestly frame that and chop this up, so you even though it's pretty clear regardless, it was 3% and the population was 50% Arab. Now, because they've hired people that more represent, and even let's be clear about that. If you were going to actively hire, even at a merit-based reality, they would very clearly, that would likely represent more than 3% of the 50% of the population. I think that's very easy to see. Or because you think somehow that only the white ones are best for the job because Arab's bad, which means you're ridiculous. It's going to be mixed, guys. That's the point. And so he went from 3% to, what'd he say?
With 45% of our officers being Arab American.
Right. So now 45% in their office are Arab, not Muslim. There's an overlap, but Arab, because 50% of the population in that area are Arabs. So it's actually 5% less than representation. And they make this out to be some kind of conquering move. It is insane to me. Now, the larger point about what else may be happening in Dearborn, reach out to me. And I've seen some things that I find interesting, but I've also seen a tremendous amount of BS. Framing people praying in public as absolutely crazy. Oh, the Palestinian flags were being overtaken. No, just, people protesting. People who could raise a flag however they want in this country. Because didn't we forget freedom and all that? We forget about the freedom part?
Alhamdulillah.
Now, let me enjoy the whole thing.
Dearborn's Arab American population was nearly 50%. Yet less than 3% of our police. Now a department that reflects and embraces the community it serves. With 45% of our officers being Arab American. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I'm proud to serve as your chief of police.
Okay, so he said a word because he's speaking about Muslims. How dare he? So saying an Arab word makes you a terrorist now? I mean, it doesn't take a special kind of intelligence to realize how this is exactly what they claim they're not doing. We're not racist. Well, yeah, you literally are being racist. That's insane. Now, could it mean what you think? Yeah, prove it, though. If you can't prove it, then you're making an assumption that because this person is a certain color, therefore that is what they think. And that's your problem. That's you doing that. And I actually think Laura and people like that absolutely know what they're doing. Very clearly. What a genius way to take down a nation. So I'll include this just because it's relevant. This is a clip I did about what's called MEMRI. It's something that Laura Loomer, Alex Jones, a lot of people reference all the time. It's this station right here. Right? That is literally run, and you could watch the clip. It's proven. I mean, you can look it up on Wikipedia if you think that matters. The evidence is so obvious that it's on Wikipedia. It was founded by current Israeli Unit 8200 intelligence and is currently run by current Israeli 8200 intelligence. That's not a joke, by the way. And yet they're like, look at what Israel intelligence just said Muslims are doing. I'm pretty sure we can't possibly consider that this person might be working for Mossad, or that every one of them standing there might be Mossad, or however you want to. And I'm not saying I can prove that, but I can prove that they've done that endless amounts of times, which has been literally documented even by the United Nations, or even by the ADL getting caught with fake Nazi marches, or however you want to frame the examples over and over of this kind of ploy. Here is the person behind RAIR. Now, from the left, you'll get a lot of conversation about how she's an anti-Muslim, which does very clearly seem to be the case. But my point is that comes largely from left framing of this about, just take that for what you will. Founder in chief of RAIR Foundation. Now, you can look through yourself. Go down and look at her content if you want to make your decision about what she's putting out there. The point for me is that this platform. Oh, and the general points for you to look up for yourself. You can look it up on Wikipedia or anything about her. She's a Jewish Zionist American who is adamantly, ardently pro-Israel and very, very, very aggressively anti-Muslim. She makes the case for herself. So consider that when you're looking at content that's about framing it framing innocent actions of people speaking about whatever, as overthrowing, conquering this country, while we're quite literally being overthrown and conquered by many other things. Like the idea that you can't see the Israel infiltration throughout this country or the technocratic transition taking right in front of us while they're pointing at something that might be happening, but I can't prove. Seems a little bit ridiculous, doesn't it? Now here's Laura Loomer. Watching the attack on Christians today in Michigan. Nope, not Christians, Laura. Mormons. First sentence. But she doesn't care. I bet you she didn't even look. She goes, I will say it's only going to get worse. And here we go. So get out of the way, the lie out of the way. Now let me build my narrative of why Muslims are bad. Democrats in Michigan are running a Muslim for Senate. Okay, so the 4-year-old white guy who shot the Mormon church has to do with this, Laura? Okay. He's openly tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, refuses to condemn. Look, I'm not defending politicians. If you think there's provable action or actionable information about him actually being tied to terrorist groups, and not what they declare a terrorist group because they don't like what they're saying, actual action of violence for political reasons, like the U.S. and Israel do every single day, then make your case, Laura. Charge him with that. The insinuation that because he's tied to groups that you don't like or groups that you think are terrorists or even groups that are, if you think they're tied to it, my bottom line point is you can look through this for yourself, or anybody who's not a complete child who will tell you Laura Loomer is the most subjective, assumptive, doxing, manipulative person on this platform. I can't help you. It's obvious. When I exposed in 2018, I destroyed this campaign. Hate against Christians is widespread in places like Michigan. Right? All of this is built on the shooting against a Mormon church, arguably from a 40-year-old white guy. Here's her video. Now, I can read all this for you. I'll just play it for you. This is what she did to go up to a guy who she's accusing of all this stuff. Who, by the way, some of the people need to start suing her because you can have a slam dunk case of libel if you really wanted to for most of what she puts out there. Here is what she had to say, and she's basically just saying this at him to get it on film. It doesn't even really care what he has to say. With their weird, we're all gonna die, opening, scary music. Enemies of the state. Oh my gosh, he's got a ball size shirt on. He's a terrorist, guys.
I just had a question for you. I just wanted to know how you reconcile your own personal practice of Islamic law with your Marxist socialist political platform that directly contradicts tenets within Islamic law.
My faith is about what I choose.
Now, so just note that she cuts all of it, right? That's a cut completely after the first response. And so that's selectively edited to make it seem the way she wants to. And even then, it doesn't really make her case, other than her getting her narrative out. Now, are you arguing that he is enforcing Sharia law? Now, here's what's actually really crazy to me. There's so many, Randy Fine pushing legislation to ban Sharia law. Can you point out an example of any actual, real, legal, like not just somebody online going, let's bring Sharia law, who probably works for Israel. Or maybe they think that. Who cares? These are average people that can say what they want. Can you demonstrate for me actual motion in the direction of Sharia law, which, by the way, would be inherently unconstitutional, therefore null and void, should it even start? But none of that matters because it's about creating this illusion that they're all coming, and look, maybe it's the case. Then prove it to me. Nobody's doing that. They love to make this case. They love to scream that it's subjective patching together arguments. And what she does is come at him and go, how do you reconcile what I tell everyone you're doing and what you're actually doing? I'm not supporting any of these people. I think all of these politicians you should be questioning and doubtful of, and I don't support any of them. Doesn't change the fact that it's easy to point out that she's being subjective and just making a gotcha moment.
To do with my life, right? I think that's what faith is. It's a choice that people make about how they live their life.
Why he basically says, my faith is about how I live my life. and that's for each person to decide. Yeah. I'm forgetting it's about a religious freedom in this country, but to hear cases that no, they're secretly evil, so we can't allow that anymore. But free speech and freedom of religion, right? Freedom of speech, but you can't say those things, so they're bad. This is Laura Loomer, a walking, talking hypocrite.
You didn't answer the question because under Islam, for example, gays are punished by death.
Again, you could make up. Is there places in the world that happens? Sure. Just like it happens in Israel, or it's happened in other places that is not hard to prove. But is it Islam everywhere kills gay? That's not true. There's so many broad misrepresentations that are constantly screamed by people like Jones and Johnson, and they have so many followers that it becomes like an accepted constant thing. They're throwing gays off the roofs in Iran. There's so many points you could make. Has things happened? Yes, you can point that out. And many of them happened under the Shah, by the way, when Israel and the United States were controlling it, but let's not talk about that. Today, they lie about every single thing they're going after, and people like Loomer are the ones dumb enough to take the bait and run with it. Because you have to understand, somebody like her, should this go awry, will be thrown to the bus faster than they can blink. And they will never even look back. And she'll be screaming about how unfair it is, how she's persecuted when she brought it on herself. And the Trumps of the world won't even blink.
I don't know that
gays
that's
are
true.
stoned, so gays are not fine and
I
thrown
don't
on
know that
buildings in the
that's-
Middle East.
not
You yourself
what it is.
said that you are a Sharia compliant Muslim.
I didn't say that.
Well, you said that your head touches the floor 34 times a day.
I choose to pray.
We're done.
Right.
See how this works? Oh, you pray, therefore you want Sharia law, right? That is the stupidest. Is there a connection in the world? Yes. To argue that every Muslim who prays anywhere is about to bring in Sharia law is the kind of garbage journalism, if you can even call it that Laura does as a matter of, it's a daily practice for her.
I think we're done. How to live
Are
their
you
life.
denying that your religion
because
tells people how to love? And
I don't know what you mean by my
operate?
religion.
Ma'am, I'm a
I
Chaldean
don't,
American.
I don't know what you
I
mean
know,
by
but
my
I'm
religion.
speaking to him.
I know, but you're kind
It's just somebody randomly coming up and saying like, you're insulting me. I have a belief. She's disgusting, like objectively disgusting.
I know you're kind of saying
there's a long
some
line.
rhetoric.
Excuse me, we have other people who'd like to talk to him. So
And imagine posting this video like you're somehow getting a gotcha moment.
I would like to speak to the candidate. I mean, he
you had enough time to speak to the candidate.
But why doesn't he want to answer my question?
Because they're
Well, he did, and you clipped it out. And clearly you were talking to him. Even in the clips you put together, you can tell that there was ongoing conversation for it seems like quite a while. But she edited it so it didn't look that way.
Ma'am,
I want to know why Jewish
you're
individuals.
repeating rhetoric.
Why should Jewish individuals like myself vote for a candidate who
Why should-
practices
why
an
should-
ideology
why
that
should
calls
a
for the
Muslim-
killing of
why
Jews
should a
and
Muslim-
Christians?
why-
So every Muslim wants the death of all Christians? Guys, it's just stupid. Like, if you're unable to acknowledge that, then you're part of the problem. And I think you know that. I think you're willfully pushing this idea. Or if you disagree, take some time to look into this for a second. Try to be objective about this and understand what these people are trying to accomplish. And then understand how, transparently people like her are being funded by the kind of people that we're always talking about. And that's not just about Israel, but very clearly manipulative. Here, and just, well, where are we right now for time? I don't want to, this is a whole separate point that I'll include, but it's the same kind of conversation. Laura Loomer is attacking Ro Khanna, who, again, I don't support any of them. I think they're all part of the government and we should question and, genuinely speaking, if you want to vote and participate, then question all of them equally as hard as you possibly can. From my perspective, I don't vote because I don't believe the system is actually, if in a true representative government, should we be forced to live in a state of society, the whole thing I have to say every time, I do think voting is paramount if it's actually translating to the outcome. I think that's been stolen from us. My point in saying all of that is that I think all these people are elements of a problem that we need to solve in this country. And I'm hopeful, like someone like Massey might prove me wrong. I hope that. But that's all to say that whether O'Connor or anybody else, I'm not choosing sides. What she's trying to do is saying that because you are doing certain things, therefore you're supporting terrorism, or it's a completely subjective overlap. She goes, there's a conference taking place in ArabCon where Muslims are gathered to talk about how they can consolidate more power in the U.S. Yeah, just like the Jewish people, just like a lot of other groups of people that try to discuss how they can consolidate power through their group. Now, is that a problem? Could be, certainly. Is it done very commonly amongst Republicans and Democrats and Jews and Christians and Muslims? Yes. But it's only bad when Muslims do it. Could it be bad when any of them do it? Yes. If certain things are happening for certain reasons and they're doing so for like let's say they're planning to overthrow the government. Well, yeah, that's bad. But all she's saying is the fact that they're collecting and saying, we want to find ways for the Muslim community to gain more influence in our conversation, that's terrorism because they're Muslims. Especially when you can prove that the Jewish population is doing that more than anybody in the entire conversation. And no, I'm not saying that that's a problem only for Jews. Zionism is the issue, and not every Jew believes in Zionism. But she says speakers and attendees are on video laughing over the October 7th Hamas. Oh, how dare they not believe what you think? And whether they were laughing about that, I find hard to believe, but you'll frame anything the way you want. Even if they were, they have a right to think what they want, Laura. You are this purity test. Remember that? Complete, like you are completely, you are the virtue signaling purity test that you project on everybody else. And he goes, Ro Khanna spoke at this conference. Are you going to condemn Ro Khanna? Are you going to condemn that they are doing this? All he says, I've called that October 7th terrorist attacks horrific and called for the unconditional release of hostages. Yeah, because he toes the line. He's literally outside of some points of like why it's a bad thing to be stopped. They all still support the genocide, guys. And he's attacking her anyway, or she's attacking him anyway. He goes, I vehemently disagree with anyone who excuses or minimizes that. Now, do you condemn Netanyahu's ongoing killing of women and children in Gaza, Laura Loomer? And you can not be shocked that she doesn't respond because she doesn't care because they're all terrorist Muslims in her mind. And she will quite literally say that out loud. This is where we are in this country. And she's just one of the most extremist examples. And I don't mean that in some terrorist sense. I just mean that her ideas are disgusting, objectively. Now, here's Alex Jones today. Staged false flag terror attacks against ICE and National Guard are the next phase of the Democrat destabilization plan. Cool. Now, can we all agree that the government does things like this all the time? Yes, we can prove that. But he will say, whatever happens next, no matter what we prove, whatever, it's going to be a Democrat thing. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like, no matter what happens next in Syria, it's going to be Assad who gassed them. That's a government thing. Alex Jones is the government. I mean that in a symbolic sense, but who knows? And what you're doing right there is an action for the power structure, Alex. And here's Andy Ngo saying, Portland, no games. Federal agents move into force and arrest of far left riots beginning. Yeah, there's stuff going on. People are protesting. They're rolling out martial law and people pushing back. If they break the law, then you can charge them for a crime. But everything else is you guys creating the air for the government to take more power, despite the claim of you fighting the deep state. It's just pathetic. This is just a broad point to the future for whatever next happens will be this, because somehow I'm psychic. But the point is, as well as I that anything else could happen. He's just trying to get ahead of that and claim whatever he wants before we even get there. This is what propaganda looks like. So we just talked about on this last show, Netanyahu exposes Israel's global tech infiltration and Trump to deploy military for domestic terrorism. And what we pointed out was the deployment in Portland that seems to be happening and the martial law reality of that and how that's very alarmingly being used to claim to go after certain things when it's aimed at one side of the paradigm and ultimately used to shut down our rights as a country. But what's interesting is it also was, very, or even the Comey point, by the way, very many examples of Donald Trump weaponizing the DOJ, just like the Biden administration did, right? And we should care regardless of what side does it, because either way, it represents a problem for the American people, right? But no, we only care when one side does it. And Bondi says, don't worry. When I read the title, I thought, oh my God, she's calling him out. Pom Bondi says the weaponization of DOJ is over under Trump. I went, wow, she's stepping up and got some gumption. Oh, nope. She's simply saying now that Trump is in, no longer is it being weaponized, despite them literally weaponizing it right now in front of you. But that's the point, though. They'll say whatever. They'll look you in the eyes, knowing that that's not true, and say it anyway. Just like KJP, just like Jen Psaki, just like John Kirby, just like every other one of the back and forth, the left and right, who will come and lie to your face about what they want you to think. Last point, just on the way out, guys, let's not forget that Donald Trump seems to be trying to start war with Venezuela. The U.S. Navy's killed 17 people in deadly strikes. 17, most of which you can prove, even according to themselves, are not drug trafficking. Now, Venezuela is giving civilians guns. Now, I want to make a point on the way out. With everything else happening, ask yourself, is that... There it goes. My gosh, this platform is really loving me lately. On the way out, guys, with this conversation of Venezuela, imagine what Donald Trump would do if Iran, China, anybody, Venezuela, started bombing American ships in international waters. I don't even care if they were actually trafficking drugs. What do you think Donald Trump would do? We'd be at war right now. They'd probably be bombing half of Venezuela. I think we kind of know that right now, whether the left or the right. And so what we're understanding here is that they have continued to bomb Venezuelan ships in international waters, regardless of what they claim or are doing. That's a crime. And they just don't care. And now Venezuela's going, and my point is, they're going, arm yourselves. There's no way this is legal, regardless of what they claim. It's in international waters. They're not somehow the policemen of the world. Arm yourselves. And so now when something happens and they open fire, guess what the narrative's going to be? I told you they were terrorists. I told you they were terrorists, and now we have to push harder. See how that works? See how easy it is to push action and then point at the action as justification for your first action, like they do in Iran, like they do literally everywhere, like they're doing to you right now. I really hope that can resonate with some people today. But we'll keep talking about this, as we always will. We will continue to break these things down and objectively cover them. And, I'm sure over the time, as we've seen in the past, there might be something that that my opinion is wrong about, or that I misrepresent because I had the wrong information. It's going to happen to all of us. But I think, even in saying that, my track record speaks for itself. Look for yourself. You point out how many times, even accidentally, I've made mistakes like that. You know why it's so rare? Because we're objective, because I wait for things to be proven. And then some rare moments when I think things are proven, it turns out somehow to be wrong because an AI video or whatever. And then you circle back and say that turned out to be false, and we correct the record. But it's quite clear what we can see happening. The precedents are there, left, right, left, right, 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 left, right, left, just keeps going on. And every time it builds a little further. And right now, I feel like it's coming to a head. And I think we all sense that. So thank you for supporting this platform. If you'd like to continue supporting it, there's links in the chat. There's links under every video. We are under attack every day. We continue to put this out for free because we believe that the information is most important. If you find value in the content, let us know what you think. Show us what the value is to you. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.